Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning. Welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and my very special guest today is Michelle Seitzer. She's a founder, Caregiving Advice, right?
That's right.
So good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here with you.
And I appreciate it immensely. And so most definitely, always looking forward to, getting good information out to our listeners.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be talking about making it work, how to successfully navigate home care with family caregiving involvement. And so I know a lot of different things I hear, different things that kind of work. So we're going to kind of delve in because this is your area of specialty. So we want to make sure that we're getting some good stuff. So let's kind of walk back and talk a little bit about what are the often undiscussed benefits of her. I mean, most people know normal benefits, but what are the benefits that people don't normally talk about?
Yes. Well, even in the very large title, which I contributed to, I think we don't remember that family caregiving and family caregivers are still involved when you bring in home care. Whether they live at home or not, there's still involvement with family caregivers. So when you transition to any type of care, you're still involved as a family caregiver. So I just want to say that up front, because I know a lot of people who are hesitant about bringing in home care or having somebody look at assisted living because they think, well, then what do I do? Well, there's still a lot for you to do. So I just wanted to say that up front. But because there's a lot you're doing as a family caregiver, one of the often undiscussed benefits of home care, in my opinion, is respite. Even though we might say it, or it's just part of the package. If you are able to delegate some of the tasks that you're already doing and doing probably without thinking about the toll it's taking on you, time-wise, health-wise, resource-wise, by delegating that to a home care provider, you are free to do other things with that time. So I think respite is one of those benefits. Another one is having an expanded village, having somebody else in your corner, having someone else on your team, your care team, that knows your parent or great aunt or whoever it is that you are caring for. Expanding that knowledge of their situation, their needs, knowing that there's somebody there who can be a plan B or a plan Z, as it were, is a huge benefit. Another one is seeing another side of your person, whether it's your parent or grandparent. In my case, we had home care for my grandparents. I've also used home care services for my daughter and myself, but in talking about my grandparents, it was really fun, I think is a good word to say, to see another side of my grandfather when he was with the home care provider that was a good fit. And we'll get into that part of it later, I know, but seeing your loved one or the person in your care interact with somebody different, and that person may be able to enhance parts of their personality that you didn't know about or that you haven't seen since been in need of care. So I think that's something that home care can bring out that people don't really think about.
And so, well, that's what we have in common is taking care of grandparents. And I will tell you the things that my grandfather did with the daytime caregiver, the programs they watched on TV. I walked in the house, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you're watching that trash. He goes, oh no, there's a reason, giggle, kind of thing. So we were very blessed with our in-home caregiver, the daytime one, that she was phenomenal. And, every day I just thank God that, that the woman on the other end of that phone whispered and said, we don't have any, caregivers at the moment to send to you, but here's a girl.
And I love that.
And so that was really, really, really good. So shouting out to you, girl. So, kudos. And so So, there's always the benefits of being at home. We know that people tend to do better at home than, necessarily than other places. And so, but let's talk about, let's kind of reverse a little bit and let's talk about the challenges,
Mhm.
of home care. I know in my life, it was finding good people. And so,
Yes. Yes.
uh, worse, I tell people all the time, my grandfather was a saint and he had a caregiver through an agency. And he called me mid-morning and said, "This woman can never come back." And I thought, "Oh my God, if you upset this man, you're a horrible person." So let's talk about your experience. What are the challenges of home care?
So we had a couple of different caregivers come in over the time that my grandfather needed home care, and not all of them stayed for different reasons.
Mhm.
So I think finding the right fit is a challenge, but I don't think we discuss that enough. We think about the challenges of maybe giving up control as a caregiver, and letting this other person, do something that we've been doing for a while. So, as a caregiver, we might think, well, we're not doing a good enough job, or we just need to try harder and find more time our day and more energy in our body. So, I think it's a challenge to let go of control and let this person come in. Now you're not really giving up control because you're still involved, but it's that feeling of passing the torch or handing it off to somebody else. um, and then if they do get along really well, maybe there's a feeling of, well, what was wrong with me? I know that was a challenge sometimes in our family, where we would do things for my grandmother because she also needed home care as well, and she was appreciative. But if the home care provider did it, it was like, look what so and so did for me. We just felt kind of like, hmm. So there's mixed feelings, I guess, and that can be an undiscussed challenge of home care. Um, there's the things that people talk about are, well, bringing a stranger into your home, and that is a challenge. But I think where we're missing some conversation is, how do you make that person feel like they're at home with you and a part of the family, but still keeping those boundaries of family and care provider? And I think that's a challenge, but it can be done. And when it's done well, then it can really work. Another challenge is when there's still a family caregiver, particularly a spouse, that's still actively caring for the person. And that's what we experienced with my grandfather. Because my grandmother was still alive, she would not leave his bedside. And it made it really difficult for the home care provider to do her job because grandma was there. So that's one I think people don't often talk about.
So how do we make it easy? So how can home care providers, work with any caregivers, in such a way that it's a win-win?
A lot of communication. And that goes on all sides. So my grandfather was a tall, strong, strapping man, but when he was bedridden and bedbound because of his dementia, it was really hard to lift and move and transfer him. That body it was dead weight. My grandmother was not well when she was caring for him because she wasn't taking care of herself. She didn't have any diagnoses, but she wasn't taking care of herself. And even if she had been at her full health, she could not have physically she didn't have the capacity physically to move him, transfer him, and do those things for him. So finding the right fit really came down to what the biggest needs were that the home care provider needed to meet, because my grandmother couldn't. So it wasn't to say, we've got this home care provider, you're out, grandma. It was to find a way that they could work together and find the gaps in care that the home care provider could meet. Something else that he needed was shaving. Personal care and grooming was something that was really hard to do in those days when he was bedbound. My sister is a hairdresser, so she came in with her equipment. Um, and I don't know if he had the sense that it was his granddaughter and that made him sad, or if he was just recognize her because he had dementia. We don't know what he knew and didn't know at the time. But he fought back when she tried to groom him one time. And that was hard. It was hard for all of us. When we finally found a caregiver who was a male caregiver, that was the golden ticket for our family. My grandfather felt comfortable with him, and he was able to do those personal tasks like grooming, bathing, which was in the bed, get changed, incontinence, all of those kinds of very intimate personal tasks. That was really where we found, a good fit for everyone. But we had to talk about it, and we had to think about what are the things that grandma can still do and do well, and what can we allow her to do? We want her to do those things. And what are the things that we need to let the caregiver come in and do?
So, when you start to spend time with, caregivers, I know that the boundaries cross, because I literally took my caregiver and her boyfriend at the time, when we evacuated for a hurricane, because I'm down here in Texas. We took everybody, her, the
Right.
boyfriend, because she didn't want to leave him, and so, everybody got to, to go hang out. And so, but boundaries are important. So talk to us a little bit about, how we kind of make sure that we're getting what we need, but yet not crossing the lines.
Yes, I think being very, very clear about everybody's roles is important in that way. And you are bringing someone into your home who is a stranger. You don't know their history. You don't know their background, where they live, where they're from. It's good to get to know each other, but I think you also have to keep that professional boundary role. So, what is the information they need to know to provide the best care, and how can you as the family provide that in a way that's respecting the person that he or she will be caring for, respecting their privacy and boundaries and dignity, but also giving them the specifics that they need to give the best care. For me, I think it was important to communicate that my grandfather had been a prisoner of war during World War II. And so any kind of restraining actions of any kind could be really triggering for him and upsetting. And that happened during some hospitalizations that he had. I didn't have to go into all of the details of how he got to be a prisoner of war, but it was important for the care provider to know that if he's getting combative, it might be because you're holding his hand too tightly, for an example. So I think finding just the right amount of specific information that still is, respectful of boundaries and privacy is important. You have to give details sometimes for them to provide the best care. And also to remember that even though they are in your home and serving your family, it's their job. And so not to expect too much of them, as if they, should stay all hours of the night. Now, granted, if there's a hurricane and you have to evacuate, that's a case-by-case basis. But, also recognizing that they have a family too. They have friends. They have a life outside of your home life. I think when the lines start to get blurred, it's easy to forget that. So I think that's an important part of remembering your roles and that professional, personal separation.
So let's kind of back up a little bit. And, we talked earlier, about communication being very important.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of go back to that a little bit. And so how do you really work hard to get, communication, to make sure that nothing gets lost, because I think that's what happens a lot sometimes is, did I tell them I needed this? Did I forget? Did they tell me? So what's a good way to kind of make sure that we don't drop the ball when it comes to communicating?
Write it down. I'm a big fan of writing things down. I have lists upon lists, probably too many lists sometimes, but and having a designated writer downer, having somebody to be in control of the communications, I think could be really helpful because the caregiver is already burdened. That's why you're bringing in home care, right? Because they need help. So to ask them to be in charge of communications, I think is too much. Um, that doesn't mean you cut them out of communication altogether, but if you designate a person that says, I'm going to go and talk to grandma, and I did this. I mean, obviously there's a common theme here, maybe of me liking to be the go-between and the writer downer, but designate a person that is good at that and enjoys that and wants to have that role in caregiving, to say, Grandma, it looks like you're not eating a full meal. So that would happen a lot, that she would feed my grandfather lunch, and whatever he didn't eat is what she ate. And if he ate everything, she ate nothing. So have somebody that can write down all of the different needs, see where there might be some conflicts happening between the caregivers, maybe write those down, and then make sure the people who need to talk are talking, and just keep a record of all of it too. So I think that's a good way to make sure nothing gets lost. And also to have a variety of perspectives, because the caregiver's perspective is so focused on their person. And so it's, I think, hard to see anything else. Another issue that we had with an earlier care provider that came in was that she would take long showers. Now, I don't know if they were really that long or if it just felt long to the grandparents listening to the water running for however many minutes it was. So that was something that we had to communicate with her. Now, again, I don't know if they really were really long showers or if it was more an indication of having a 24/7 caregiver wasn't the right fit for the time. But I think having a designated person to catch all of those concerns, questions, challenges, conflicts, food, another thing that we had to talk about. She would prepare food that they didn't like, but if we hadn't told her what kind of food they did like, then it wasn't really her fault. It was a lack of communication. So I like to encourage people when I do coaching with different caregivers to look at their day and map out their whole day, like 24 hours, a day in the life of Kim, Michelle, whoever your person is that you're caring for. And think about all those things that you just do without thinking, that somebody coming in and having no understanding of your family or who you are, your preferences, your favorite snack times, your favorite snacks. My husband's favorite is chocolate, and I have to hide it from him. Otherwise, he eats it as soon as I put it in the cabinet. But somebody coming in wouldn't know that. So write down a day in the life. Yes, every day is different, especially when you're in a caregiving situation. But what are some of those, established things that a person coming in brand new would need to know? Don't use my favorite mug, for example. I get kind of upset sometimes when somebody's in my house and using my favorite mug. Those are things they need to know. And if you have somebody designated to making sure all of that information gets recorded and transmitted to the right person, it goes a long way.
So, Michelle, if there's caregivers out there that want some advice, how do they find you?
They can find me at caregivingadvice.com. I also have an Instagram channel or feed at Caregiving Advice, and I do a lot of new content there, fresh content there. Or they can email me, Michelle, Michelle, at caregivingadvice.com.
Perfect. And so thanks so much. And so I so much appreciate all the good information. And it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to doing it again.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun to share.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcasts as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.